get a little bit worried when I see people who write quite a detailed plan, turn over the page and then start writing and think, that must have taken you 10 minutes. You know, you've got to think, what's this plan going to look like? It should be just a couple of notes at most. What I found useful was if I was writing 2 or 3 essays in the exam, was to look at to leave a page open for the second one, because as I was going through the first exam, I'd suddenly remember things which were going to be in my second question, and I'd just jot those down. Somehow the brain works at 2 things at once. Start at the right place, I think, is really important. And this is the number of exams I get which start out with, you know, over the last 100 years, the environment has been devastated and people are left bereft, and you get this long sort of, feels very A-level like sort of introduction. You get to sort of an essay, which has nothing to do with the question. You know, we don't need all that blurby fill. You're not going to get any marks. In fact, you're going to annoy the examiner, the marker. It won't just be me, by the way. So I'm not just talking about myself. You want to get in, start at the right place. Start with, and I'll show you what I mean. Start with something which is directly answering the question, and start from there. You've also got to think about the volume. So if you were at Amy's lectures or watched it online, if you took something like the fishing lecture, and I asked you to explain to me how a tax system might be used to correct the open access problem in a fishery. One place you could start is right back at the biological model, thinking about the growth curve of fish stock, and therefore how much growth we get per period, and therefore as we bring in effort and we start harvesting out some of the fish, what does that mean? What's the relationship between effort and the level of a catch period? And you could build that model up until the point at which you had the construction from which you could come in and start answering the question. I reckon you need 4 sides to do that, and I reckon you would not have enough time to answer the question. So you've got to think, what do I do? Well, I think you've got to say to the examiner at that point, I've got to start assuming that I can start from the model which shows me the relationship between the amount of effort and the level of harvest. And then I can start thinking about what I do when a tax comes in. And I might explain that to the examiner. I say, well, you know, this model is developed out of an understanding how fish stocks grow over time and the relationship between that effort and harvesting. I haven't got the time within this essay to construct that. What I'm going to deal with this model and show you how. And in doing that, you've started right in the right place. You've saved yourself so much time. You're still answering the question, but you can get into being able to get the big points which come from answering the question. There's another thing you have to be aware of, is it's easy to pick up the big points. It's easy to pick up the 60%. You can get to that 60% really quickly, and this will come to a time, I think, as well. So if I can see that you understand the key concepts, I can see you getting across the major arguments, I immediately am shifting up through 40. 40 is sort of turning up and saying you know something about it, you're roughly there. 50 is showing you've got some of the ideas straight in your head. 60 is showing you have a good, competent understanding of the material. To get to there should not be beyond you really quite quickly in any essay. To get to the 70s and the 80s is hard. You've got to start bringing examples. You've got to show some better knowledge, some more in-depth understanding, perhaps have done extra reading. But to get that extra is a lot more work. So the idea of diminishing margin production product here is so relevant. You can get that 60 really quickly. Start in the right place, get earning those marks as soon as you can. And if you want to, clever enough to tell the examiner what you're doing, that they're going to think, that's great. I want to think, this is a person who's thinking about this essay. Thinks what they have to get to when they get started. To stay focused on the question, we can't give you credit for things which aren't related to the question. So just spewing material out because you know it's a bit irrelevant is not going to get you marks. It just isn't. So just stay focused on the question. Save yourself your time for your second answer. Don't feel like you have to write tons of stuff just because you can. And dedicate 1 hour to each answer. So I know even sitting here now that I'll get 2 or 3 exam scripts from you guys, hopefully no one in this room, where I'll turn over to the second one and there'll be 3 or 4 lines and then ... sorry, I ran out of time. And I've had 15 pages of unnecessary dribble on the first one, which I've managed to give them a 60 or 70 or even it might be a brilliant essay, but then they get 10% or 5% on the second one. And they've ended up with a 40 or a 50 overall. Whereas it's so easy they've got the 60, and got themselves a good 60. If you find yourself, you're 1 hour in, you haven't finished the first question, what's your strategy? What would you do? I mean, I'm interested to know from you guys what you do.
Depends how far then you are. If you're close to finishing, then finish that and finish that.
potentially.
Okay, second one and a third at the end, which is the first one.
I think there's a couple of ways of going. I mean, you have to be careful. I mean, I've done this myself. I'm about to finish, but then 15 minutes later, I'm still just finishing. Because you know, you've got all this material you want to get in. I think there's a couple of strategies. One is, like you say, stop, get on the second question, earn your marks on that, and realise you've got to go back, get through that one quicker, get yourself your time sorted out again. Because you just earn so many marks in that first bit. The second bit is to finish the essay in note form. So just jot down what you're going to go through, get onto the second one. Just like a multiple choice question, you'd never ever not tick at least an answer in each multiple choice question. So never leave an essay unfinished. Just go into bullet points. I can give you marks if you show me information. I can't if you don't. So if you're running out of time, there's no excuse. 5 minutes to go. Go into bullet points. Get it down on paper. You can do really well. I mean, I know I've given 60% marks for people who have done half an essay in bullet points because it's absolutely clear to me. They've seen the structure and know the sorts of things that have got to go in there. So please don't not finish. Try and use your time wisely because of this fact that you're going to build up so many more points. That last 15 minutes you put in that essay over that hour, you might get 3 more points for it. I mean, honestly, you're just not adding much. What you'll get from putting that time into the other essay is enormous. So really, you've got to be strict with yourself. You've got to go, okay, I've cocked up a bit here, but I'm not going to cock up my second essay. I'm going to get on and do that. I'm going to put a few notes here. If I get the time to come back and write that out better, I will get better mark, but not at the expense of the other. Really important. How am I doing on time?
It's about 10 minutes over.
10 minutes over? Oh God, you guys got to go.
Yeah.
Sorry. Does anyone want to stay a little bit longer?
I don't mind if it's important stuff.
Well, it depends. What I wanted to do is just give you, there is one thing I think is important. God, Amy told me she was finishing lectures early. I've never finished a lecture early, which shows my particular rambling style. These are the example questions. Look, I could go through some of them, but what I want you to think about is where you start your essay, what's important here. And it's not some general rubbish about the environment, about anything, it's about this question. And one of the ways I think is a good thing about thinking to start is making sure you are telling the examiner you know the terms that are used and where this essay is going, okay, what it's about. So I think you can always write a paragraph which sets you off, which is getting your mind straight, which gets you started, before you get into your arguments that are going to run through it before you reach a conclusion. So there I've given you the structure that I think you should be using on all of these. Most of them are going to be a discuss or a question, question, question. So there's a reason. You're here, you're trying to get somewhere, or compare and contrast. Discuss. Okay, so there's a reason. You've got to get to this end of the essay and give us some sort of conclusion about what's going on. So if you took this first one, interpersonal utility comparisons are not feasible. So utilitarian, I've got 2 things over here. Interpersonal utility comparisons, utilitarian ideas about resource allocation cannot be implemented in practice. I'll go through that. I might underline these myself and say, look, there's 3 key things that the examiner has asked me to talk about here, and I've got to get across them and I know what those are. If I do that in the first paragraph, I think you've got 40% already. So I honestly think it's that important to be able to say, this essay concerns, if I was answering this off the top of my head, this essay concerns making decisions for society. It's about social decision making. The idea of utilitarianism is that we should think about what's best for society by choosing allocations of resources which maximise the sum of utilities measured for every member of society. And you've already defined what utilitarian is. But a counter-argument would say that utility is not measurable. I quote the Jevons thing, every mind is inscrutable to every mind, every other mind. And because utility is not comparable, how could we use this idea of utilitarianism to make a decision? So I've tried to, within one paragraph, go through each of the things and show that I understand each of the terms before I get into my essay. So, and then I say, and this essay will go through the arguments for utilitarian, what it is, the counter-arguments for new welfare economics. And you'd go through those things, and you'd come to the conclusion that new welfare economics is probably the best of a bad bunch, because at least we can do it, and it's pretty difficult. Or, anyone else want to do? Let's try this one, because this is from me. It's compare and contrast the real preferences, stated preferences for valuing preferences for non-market goods, environmental goods. Let's check your answer by means of examples as appropriate. what are the key things here? Revealed preference and stated preference, and non-market valuation goods, the valuation of these non-market goods. Got to get over the first paragraph that I need. Put it in the context, tell me where it's going to be. So in evaluating projects or programs and policies, governments need to be able to compare the outcomes and see whether they're a good idea. For this, they use methods of social cost-benefit analysis. But some of these projects and programs have impacts on the environment. How are we going to bring that into the framework? Well, we're going to use these tools of non-market environmental valuation to do that. There's two basic tools. The revealed preference ones, which use observed behaviour to tell us something about how people value the environment, and the stated preference ones, which use information from carefully constructed questionnaires. In this essay, I'm going to look at those two methods and compare and contrast their characteristics. And then you go through those, and your essay would say, revealed preference, there's a couple of methods you can use, hedonics, travel cost, stated preference, that, this contingent valuation, this choice experiments, and then you've got to do this, compare and contrast. People like these ones because it's real behaviour, and we have problems with hypothetical bias with the ones which are based on questionnaires. The problem is that these only are ever going to see things where people get value from using things. But if people value things from not using them, in non-use, then we've got to use these techniques. But there's only certain things we can value, even the use things where we can do this. So these techniques are going to be needed. And you're going to come to a conclusion. You're going to say, well, if we could, we'd want to use revealed preference where we can, but there's a whole series of areas where we can't. And those have problems because they're based on questionnaires, hypothetical methods. So we've got to design those really carefully if they're going to be appropriate for use. So again, same thing. Get across, the core concepts in there. Go through the key parts of your arguments. Here you have to put in some examples. That's what Ian's asking for in this question, and come to a conclusion. Right. Sorry for everybody. If you've got any questions, you can always email me, or if you're around, I'll see you next week. And next week, if you're not, we'll go out before and stuff. On holiday.